The air in Leo Mancini's study was a physical presence, thick with the scent of old leather, Cuban cigar smoke, and the silent, suffocating weight of power. Sarah Washington moved through it like a ghost, her rubber-solid shoes making no sound on the polished mahogany floor. Her cleaning cart was her partner in invisibility, its quiet rattle the only evidence of her labor. On the other side of a desk the size of a small car, Leo spoke into the phone, his voice a low growl that could strip paint from walls. He wasn't shouting. He never shouted. He spoke with the calm, chilling authority of a man who knew his words could end lives. Sarah kept her eyes down, focused on the faintish moods on the glass of a bookcase filled with leather-bound volumes that had never been read. She could feel his gaze on her, even as he spoke of shipments and territories. Finally, a quiet click echoed in the room as he placed the receiver back in its cradle. The silence that followed was louder than the phone call. She dared not look up, her hands methodically wiping a surface that was already spotless. "Stop," he said. The word was not a request. Sarah froze, her heart seizing in her chest. She could feel him standing, the subtle shift of air as he moved around the desk. His expensive Italian shoes came into her line of sight. He stopped directly in front of her. Slowly, reluctantly, she lifted her head. His eyes, dark and piercing, waiting to looking at her eyes. They were fixed on a small, flesh-colored bandage taped clumsily to her left cheekbone. The silence stretched, thin and brittle. His face was a mask of cold neutrality, impossible to read. Then, in that same gravelly, quiet voice, he asked a question that was not about the bandage at all. "Who disrespected my house?" The question hung in the air, a blade sharpened on both sides. Sarah's mind raced, trying to decipher its meaning. Disrespected his house? Was he talking about the bandage? Did he think she'd been in a fight on his property? Or worse, that she had brought some squalid trouble from her world into his pristine, ordered sanctuary? Her voice, when she found it, was a mere whisper, thin and reedy. "Mr. Mancini, I don't understand." He didn't move, his gaze unwavering from the patch on her skin. He was a man in his late 60s, built like a bull, with a mane of silver hair combed back from a weathered face. He wore a tailored suit of charcoal gray that probably cost more than her car, but he wore it with the casualness of a man in pajamas. It was his skin. Power was his skin. His son, Marco, a man who wore his own expensive suits like a costume, often swaggered through these halls, barking orders at staff, treating them like furniture. Leo was different. His power was in his stillness, in the unnerving calm that promised a storm of terrifying violence if provoked. He gestured vaguely at her face with a large, manicured hand. He said, the word clipped, "that is a mark of disrespect. Not to you, Timu. It happened under my roof, or it was brought through my garage. Either way, an answer is required." Sarah's breath hissed. This was a logic she called in to comprehend, a code from a world she only glimpsed in hushed whispers among the other staff. She had fallen down the stairs at her apartment building 2 nights ago. That was the story she told her son, David. It was the story she told herself, because the truth was a bitter pill she called in to swallow. The truth was her ex-husband, Jamal, his patience worn thin by her refusal to give him money she didn't have, his hand connecting with her face with a sickening crack. "It was an accident, sir," she mumbled, her eyes cast down to the intricate patterns of the Persian rug. "I am clumsy. I fell." Leo was silent for a long moment. She could feel his scrutiny, as if he were trying to peer directly into her soul, to weigh the truth of her words on some internal, infallible scale. "Look at me," he commanded, his voice soft but unyielding. She flinched, but did as she was told, forcing her gaze to meet his. His eyes held no sympathy, only a cold, hard assessment. He was looking at the lead, not the injury. "In my world, Mrs. Washington," he said slowly, "there are no accidents. There are actions and consequences. Someone acted. There will be a consequence." He turned away from her then, walking towards the vast window that overlooked the manicured lawns rolling down to the Long Island Sound. He stood with his back to her, a formidable silhouette against the gray afternoon light. "Finish your work. But know this. The truth is a way of showing itself in this house. And leave. Leaves out a debt that always gets paid." Sarah stood paralyzed for a moment, her cleaning cloth clutched in a white-knuckled grip. Her simple, desperate leave had not been a shield, it had been an insult. She had brought a problem into his world, and now, terrifyingly, he had made it his. She finished her work in a daze, her movements stiff and robotic. The encounter had rattled her more than Jamal's blow. Jamal was a familiar kind of monster, his rage a predictable, pathetic storm. Leo Mancini was something else entirely. He was a force of nature, a man whose displeasure could rewrite a person's entire existence. As she wheeled her cart through the silent, opulent hallway, she felt the eyes of the house on her. The portraits of long-dead Mancini seemed to follow her progress, their painted faces stern and judgmental. The other staff members, Maria the cook and Sal the head of security, gave her wide berth. News traveled fast in a place like this, not through words, but through charged silences and averted glances. She knew they must have seen the bandits, must have drawn their own conclusions. But now, it was different. The boss had noticed. The problem had been amplified, elevated from my maid as a private shame to a matter of household honor. Sal, a man whose neck was as thick as her waist and whose face seemed permanently set in a scowl, stopped her near the service exit. He didn't speak, just gave her a long, hard look before his eyes flickered to the security camera mounted above the door. The message was clear: you are being watched. The drive home to her small apartment in Flatbush was a blur of traffic and anxiety. The Mancini estate on the north shore of Long Island was a different planet from her world of crowded streets, sirens, and the constant, grinding struggle to make ends meet. She was a single mother to 9-year-old David, a bright, bubbly boy who was the sole reason she endured this life. She worked 2 jobs cleaning for the Mancinis 3 days a week and working evenings at a diner to keep them afloat, to give David a chance at a life better than hers. Jamal was a ghost from a past she called Intessin de Escape, a man who saw her and David not as family, but as an attempt that had run dry. That evening, as she helped David with his homework, her mind kept replaying Leo Mancini's words. Lee's out a debt that always gets paid. What did he mean? What did he intend to do? The fear was a cold knot in her stomach. The next day she worked at the Mancini house was a Thursday. She arrived with a fresh bandage, the breeze beneath it a deep, ugly purple. She tried to make herself even more invisible than usual, sticking to the shadows, her head bowed. But the house wouldn't allow it. Mark Mancini, Leo's heir apparent, cornered her in the kitchen. He was in his 30s, with his father's dark looks but none of his quiet menace. Marqu's power was loud, insecure, and cruel. "Fee, you," he said, snapping his fingers, "clean up the mess in the billiard room, and for God's sake, try not to walk into any more doors." He smirked, looking to Maria the cook for approval. Maria kept her face blank, her hands busy kneading dough. Sarah just nodded, her cheeks burning with shame. "Yes, Mr. Marco." The billiard room was a disaster. A late-night poker game had left a battlefield of empty glasses, overflowing ashtrays, and cigar butts ground into the felt of the table. A glass of what looked like whiskey had been spilled, leaving a sticky, dark stain. As Sarah meticulously cleaned, picking up each glass, her mind drifted. This was the disrespect, the casual, thoughtless mess left by men who never had to clean up after themselves. It was the same brand of disrespect Jamal had shown her, just packaged differently. One came with a smirk, the other with a fist. She found a wallet tucked between the cushions of a leather armchair. It was thick with cash and platinum credit cards. Marqu's driver's license photo grinned up at her. For a fleeting second, a dark thought crossed her mind. Taking a few $100 bills would be so easy. He would never miss it. It would pay her rent, buy David the new sneakers he desperately needed. It would be a small tax on their carelessness, a tiny measure of justice. But the thought was gone as quickly as it came. That was their way, not hers. Stealing was a lie, and she was already in debt. She cleaned the sticky residue from the table, emptied the ashtrays, and placed the wallet squarely in the center of the perfectly brushed green felt. She didn't have to wait long. Mark stormed in an arleter, his face flushed with panic. He saw the wallet immediately, his relief quickly morphing back into arrogance. He snatched it up, flipping through it to make sure everything was there. He didn't thank her. He didn't even acknowledge her. He just turned and left, leaving her in the now pristine room. But she knew someone else had seen. From the doorway, she caught a glimpse of Leo Mancini standing further down the hall, watching. He met her eyes for a brief second, his expression unreadable, before he turned and walked away. The silent test had been passed, but instead of relief, Sarah felt a new wave of dread. She wasn't just a help anymore. She was a person he was watching. The days that followed were a quiet torment. The bruise on her cheek faded, but the tension in the Mancini house only grew. Leo was a spectral presence, rarely seen but always felt. He would appear in doorways, watch her work for a moment, and then vanish without a word. Each silent observation felt like a judgment, a weighing of her character. She learned to live with the constant, low-level fear, focusing on her tasks with a singular, desperate focus. Do the job. Stay invisible. Go home to David. That was the mantra that got her through that day. But the outside world, her world, refused to stay outside. One afternoon, as she was leaving, she saw Jamalis beat up sedan parked across the street from the imposing Mancini garage. Her blood ran cold. He wasn't supposed to know where she worked. She had been so careful. He must have followed her. She quickly ducked back inside the service entrance, her heart hammering against her ribs. Sal was there, watching the monitors that showed every angle of the estate's perimeter. He didn't turn around, but his voice was low and rough. "You have a visitor." "He is not a visitor," she breathed, her voice shaking. "He is my ex-husband. He can't be here." Sal finally turned to look at her, his impassive face giving nothing away. "He is not on the property. Public street. Can't you do anything? Please," she begged, the word tasting like ash. "You don't understand. He is." She couldn't finish the sentence. She couldn't admit the sordid truth of her life in this place of sterile power. Sal just grunted. "Wait here. I'll get one of the drivers to take you to the train station. Use the back exit." He was offering a practical solution, not sympathy. A way to manage the contamination. As she waited in the sterile gray of the security office, she felt a profound sense of hopelessness. She could run, she could hide, but Jamal was a weed that would keep growing back, choking the life out of everything she tried to build. The driver, a quiet man named Tori, dropped her off without a word. But as she walked toward the station, she saw Jamal's car again, parked half a block away. He was waiting. He was hunting her. She spent the entire train ride back to Brooklyn looking over her shoulder, her body trembling. That night, he showed up at her apartment, banging on the door, his voice a drunken slew as he shouted for money. David hid in his room, his small face pale with fear. Sarah called the police, but by the time they arrived, Jamal was gone. It was the same old story. Without a direct threat, without visible violence, their hands were tied. "Get a restraining order," one of the officers advised, his tone weary. She had one. It was a piece of paper. It hadn't stopped Jamal's fist, and it wouldn't stop his harassment. The next time she was at the Mancini estate, the air was different. The unspoken tension had solidified into something hard and sharp. She was in the main foyer, polishing the already gleaming marble floors, when Leo Mancini came down the grand staircase. He stopped on the bottom step, looking down at her. "My head of security tells me you had a problem leaving the other day," he said. "It wasn't a question. He tells me the same problem showed up at your home later that night." Sarah froze on her hands and knees, the smell of lemon wax filling her nostrils. She didn't know what to say. The truth was a raw, gaping wound. To expose it here felt like a violation. "It is a personal matter, so," she whispered, her eyes fixed on the swirl in the marble. "I am handling it." "You are not handling it," he replied, his voice dangerously soft. "It is now a distraction. It is a loose end, and I do not tolerate loose ends." He took the final step down, his polished shoes clicking on the floor. He walked over to her, and for a terrifying moment, she thought he might strike her. Instead, he crouched down, an incredible act for a man of his age and stature, bringing himself to her level. His cologne was subtle but overpowering. "Mrs. Washington," he said, his voice barely a murmur. "I asked you a question in my study last week. I am going to ask you again, who disrespected my house? This time, she understood. The disrespect wasn't the bruise. It was the man who had caused it. It was the problem that had followed her to his guts. The leave was no longer an option. The debt had come due. Tears welled in her eyes, how unshameful. They traced paths down her cheeks as the whole sordid, exhausting story poured out of her. She told him about Jamal, about the marriage that had started with hope and ended in fear, about the drinking, the jealousy, the casual cruelty that had escalated over the years. She told him about the restraining order that was nothing more than a piece of paper, about the police who always told lies, about the constant fear that gnawed at her, the fear for herself and, most of all, for her son. She spoke in a low, trembling voice, the words stumbling over each other in her haste to finally give voice to the truth. She expected him to be disgusted, to fire her for bringing her messy, pathetic life into his orderly world. When she finished, she kept her head down, unable to look at him, waiting for the verdict. Leo Mancini remained crouched in front of her for a long time. The silence in the grand foyer was absolute, broken only by the distant tick-tock of a grandfather clock. When he finally spoke, his voice was different. The chilling edge was gone, replaced by something else, something she couldn't identify. It wasn't pity. It was something harder, colder. It was recognition. So, this man, he said, his voice a low rumble. He puts his hands on a woman. He terrorizes a child. He does this because he is strong, and you are weak. This is his justification. Sarah could only nod, a tear splashing onto the marble floor. And the people you pay to protect you, he continued, his voice laced with a dark, ancient contempt, the ones with the badges and the laws. They tell you to get a piece of paper, as if paper can stop a fist. He stood up then, towering over her. He looked not at her, but at the grand, empty space around them. It was as if he were speaking to himself, to the ghosts of his own past. There is the world you see on the television, the world of laws and rules and pieces of paper. It is a nice story. And then there is the world as it is, the world of strength and weakness, of predators and prey. This man, your Jamal, he is a predator, but he is a stupid one. He has been hunting in another man's territory. He turned and walked away without another word, leaving Sarah kneeling on the floor, trembling and utterly bewildered. She didn't know if she had just been saved or condemned. The rest of the day passed in a surreal fog. No one spoke to her. No one looked at her. But she felt a shift in the house, a subtle change in the currents of power. It was as if a silent order had been given, a ripple spreading out from the conversation in the foyer. Sal was no longer just watching her. He was watching for something. She saw him speaking quietly into his wrist, his eyes scanning the perimeter fences on the monitors. The air crackled with a silent, menacing energy. When she left that evening, there was no sign of Jamal's car. The street outside the Mancini Guts was empty, quiet. The drive home was unnervingly peaceful. There were no drunken calls that night, no hammering on her door. The silence from his end was absolute. It was a silence that was more terrifying than his rage. What had Leo Mancini done? The question haunted her through a sleepless night. The next day was Saturday, her day off. She took David to the park. For the first time in months, she felt a sliver of peace, a breath of clean air. She watched her son laugh as he climbed the jungle gym, his small face alight with joy, and she allowed herself to hope. Maybe Jamal had finally given up. Maybe he had gotten the message, whatever it was. But the hope was fragile, a thin bun of glass that she was afraid to touch for fear of shattering it. Monday arrived, and with it, her return to the Mancini estate. She walked through the guts with a knot of dread in her stomach. She still didn't know what had transpired, what invisible war had been fought on her behalf. She was cleaning the upstairs hallway when Marco Mancini appeared. He looked agitated, his usual pleading arrogance replaced by a nervous energy. "My father wants to see you," he clipped it, not meeting her eye. "His office." Now, her heart pounded as she made the long walk to the study. The door was ajar. She knocked softly. Leo's voice, calm as ever, bid her to enter. He was sitting behind his massive desk, a small espresso cup in his hand. Sal was standing near the window, his arms crossed over his chest, a mountain of quiet intimidation. Leo gestured to the chair opposite him. "Sit, Mrs. Washington." It was the first time he had ever invited her to sit. She perched on the edge of the plush leather chair, her hands clenched in her lap. "There was a situation over the weekend," Leo began, taking a slow sip of his espresso. "A man was found causing a disturbance in a neighborhood he did not belong in. He was persuaded to relocate." He set the cup down, the delicate porcelain making a soft clink against the saucer. "He was given a bus ticket to a city far from here, a city where he has no connections, no history. He was also given a warning, a very clear, very simple warning about the consequences of returning to New York." Sarah stared at him, her mind struggling to process the information. Persuaded. Relocated. The words were so sterile, so clean. They were a world away from the ugly, violent reality she knew they concealed. "What did you do?" she whispered, the question escaping before she could stop it. Leo's lips curved into something that was not Kita's smile. It was a look of profound, weary satisfaction. "I did what the police and their pieces of paper could not. I introduced a consequence. Your ex-husband understands the world of strength and weakness, Mrs. Washington. He simply made the mistake of showing his strength to someone who was smarter. He is a bully, and bullies are, at their core, cowards. He will not be coming back. You have my word on that." Sal, from his position by the window, spoke for the first time. His voice was a flat, emotionless baritone. "We have made arrangements to ensure his compliance." The finality in his tone sent a shiver down her spine. They hadn't just scared Jamal. They had erased him from her life. It was a terrifying, breathtaking act of power. It was a gift, wrapped in violence and intimidation. It was justice, delivered through the very means she had always feared. A complex wave of emotions washed over Sarah. There was relief, a profound, soul-deep relief that felt like waking up from a long nightmare. The weight of fear she had carried for years was suddenly, miraculously lifted. But there was also a cold dread. She had made a deal with the devil, albeit the devil who had solved her problem. She was indebted to a man whose world operated on a currency of loyalty and violence that she could never hope to repay. She looked at Leo Mancini, at the calm, impassive face of a man who could order a person's life to be uprooted with a single, quiet command. She saw him not as a monster, but as something far more complex, a product of his will, a king ruling by his own brutal code. A code that had, in this instance, protected her when the one she was supposed to trust had failed. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Why would you do this for me?" Leo leaned back in his chair, the leather groaning softly. He stipulated his fingers, his dark eyes studying her. "Last week, my son left his wallet in the billiard room. It contained over $2,000 in cash. You found it. You could have taken the money. A person in your position, it would have been understandable. He would not have missed it, but you did not. You cleaned the room and left the wallet where he could not miss it. You showed integrity." He paused, letting the words sink in. "This world, Mrs. Washington, is full of people like your ex-husband, takers, bullies. They see weakness and they feed on it. Integrity, true character, that is rare. It is a valuable commodity. You did not disrespect my house. Your ex-husband did. I do not tolerate disrespect. It is as simple as that. He was not a savior. He was not a friend. He was a businessman, and he had made an investment. Your integrity had been noted, valued, and now rewarded in the only way he knew how. It was a transaction. There is also the matter of your son," he continued, his tone shifting slightly. "My accountant has been instructed to set up an educational trust for him. It will cover his schooling, all the way through university, should he choose to go. Consider it a bonus, a reward for your discretion and good service." Sarah was speechless. Her mind reeled. David's future, the future she worked her fingers to the bone for, had just been secured. It was a gift of unimaginable generosity, a life-altering act, but it was also a chain, binding her to him, to this house, to this world. She was no longer just a maid. She was one of his people now, protected by the fearsome shadow of the Mancini name, and by extension, beholden to it. I don't know what you say, she stammered, tears of shock and gratitude and fear blurring her vision. Say nothing, Leo said, his voice returning to its usual cool authority. Just continue to do your job well. The matter is closed. He picked up a pen from his desk, a clear dismissal. The audience was over. Sal opened the door for her, his face as impassive as ever. As she walked out of the study and back into the silent, opulent hallway, the world looked different. The air felt lighter. The portraits on the walls no longer seemed to be judging her. She was Safa. Her son was Safa. The monster who had haunted her was gone. She had traded one kind of fear for another, but the new fear was distant, abstract, while the freedom was immediate and real. Later that week, a plain envelope arrived at her apartment. It contained a single sheet of paper from a prestigious financial firm, detailing the terms of the David Washington Educational Trust. The numbers were staggering, enough to change the entire trajectory of her son's life. There was no note, no mention of the Mancini's. It was clean, anonymous, just like the disappearance of her ex-husband. A few weeks later, the bandage was long gone, the faint scar on her cheek the only physical reminder of her ordeal. She was in the Mancini kitchen, polishing silver, when Maria, the cook, spoke to her. It was the first thing they had had a real conversation in months. Your face, Maria said softly, her hand still. It is healed well. Sarah touched her cheek, a ghost of a smile on her lips. Yes, she said, it has. Maria nodded, a deep, knowing look in her eyes. It was a look of understanding, of shared experience living in the orbit of a dangerous, powerful man. It was a look that said she knew, without knowing the details, that a problem had been taken care of. In that moment, Sarah understood that she had crossed a threshold. She was no longer just an outsider who came to clean the house. She was part of its ecosystem, protected by its strange and terrible king. The price of that protection was her silence and her loyalty, a price she was more than willing to pay. That evening, as she tucked David into bed, he looked up at her, his eyes wide and serious. Is the bad man ever coming back, Mommy? He asked, a question he had been too afraid to voice before. She smoothed the hair back from his forehead, her heart swelling with a fierce, protective love. For the first time, she could give him the answer he needed to hear, an answer given to her by the most unlikely of angels. No, baby, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. He is never coming back. You race off now. And as she watched him drift off to sleep, his face finally free from the shadow of fear, she knew that no matter what deal she had made, no matter what moral lines had been crossed, it had all been worth it. She had found justice not in a courtroom, but in the cold, quiet study of a mafia boss. And in the brutal world she inhabited, that was the only kind of justice that mattered. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Stories like this remind us that strength and character can be found in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes justice appears in forms we never could have imagined. What part of Sarah's story resonated with you the most? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoy content that explores the depths of human drama, be sure to subscribe to the channel for more.